Alright everyone, hello and welcome back to another one of these Overwatch League Season 2 roster videos. Today we're going to be talking about the Season 1 10th placed team, which happens to be the Dallas Fuel, which also is interesting because the Dallas Fuel just made some roster moves yesterday. They signed one new player, but we'll talk about that when we get there. But I want to try something a little bit different this time around, and I'm going to go by role instead of just down the names of players. But I want to start, of course, with what has changed about this team. Because there have been, of course, some changes. They did cut some players and watch some players leave. So we're going to start with the two players that they released at the end of the season. They released Chip Cyan and they released Coco. Now, Coco, who was their backup main tank player, has moved to a coaching role with the team. So he's still with the team, just not playing. Chip Cyan is, as far as I know, not with any team right now. He is doing some. He was a support player. I believe he was their backup, like Zenyatta player. And he was playing Zenyatta at like the beginning of the season and then got replaced. But those who were cut by the team, what I think is their biggest loss, of course, though, is the retirement of Seagull. Seagull had such a wide hero pool. He could play pretty much anything you needed him to. And I think that was the biggest loss of this team suffered during the offseason, because he was a very good player. And now he's gone. So we have to see what this team is like without a star like Seagull, a well-known player, something like that. But I think this team will manage without him. So let's go over what their Season 2 roster looks like. Obviously, with only 3 players gone from last season, you'd assume that the majority of this roster is the same, and it is. Only 2 players on this Season 2 roster that were not on the Season 1 roster. So let's start with the DPS role. You got 3 players. You have Taimu, who is a Finland player, or a player from Finland. You have Effect, who is a DPS player, obviously, from South Korea, and then you have AKM, who is from France. So I'm going to start with Taimu. Taimu is part of this team's history, right? He's been there for a long time. Taimu is going to be your Widowmaker player, right? He's going to be your hitscan guy pretty much the entire season. I don't see anything changing. He might play some Roadhog here and there, but I expect him to be their Widowmaker player. He was their guy on that Widowmaker role last season, and you know he's been around a long time and he has history. The one problem is that he's kind of inconsistent. He has ups and has downs, and it's been a problem for this team in the past. But when he's playing well, he's good. But luckily, this team has other DPS players where if Taimu's not playing well, they can sub him out and put someone else in who will do the job that they need. But I think Taimu's a fine player, and he's one of the leaders of this team, so I don't expect him to be out too much. Next we have Effect, who is the South Korean DPS player. He set out the late parts of Season 1, went back to South Korea for prior to Stage 4, and then didn't return. I don't know if they ever said the reason why, but he is back with the team. He's going to play some of those other heroes that Taimu doesn't have, but also some of the same ones, right? He's got a Widowmaker, he's got a McCree, Soldier 76, all that kind of stuff. He's also got a Tracer, got a Doomfist. He's not a huge Brigitte fan, which is ironic, because I think this is a team that will use a lot of Brigitte. I think that they like Brigitte, and I expect to see a good amount of Brigitte use from this team. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do with effect this season, because obviously, if you remember last season, right, the Dallas Fuel only had 12 wins all season. Um, Half of those wins though came in the final stage of the season. They had 6 wins in stage 4, and then they had 1 win in stage 3, 2 wins in stage 2, and 3 wins in stage 1. So we're talking about a team that started out, bad with 3 wins, and then just got worse. And then stage 4 comes along. They have a new head coach. The Brigitte meta begins, and they get 6 wins. Half of their wins came from one stage. Half their wins came from one stage. 10 games out of the 40. Right. 25% of the season is where they got half of their wins. And it's impressive. So obviously they're an improved team. And they did this without effect. With effect, I'm curious to see how this team plays and how this team does, because it's going to be different. But I think with the addition of Arrow as their head coach, they started to play better, and I think the current meta favors this team a lot more than the early metas. So yeah, I'm sorry if I sound a little sick. I woke up this morning and my nose is very stuffy, and I don't know why. So apologies. But yeah, Effect will be an interesting player to watch. It's interesting to see how he and Taimu and AKM, obviously, who I'll talk about now, will kind of like switch between each other. AKM's going to have their Pharah, right? He's the guy who's going to have to play Pharah because they don't really have anybody else to play that Pharah role. So he's going to be your guy in your Pharah, and a lot of these hero pools are very similar between AKM, Taimu, and Effect. They play a lot of the same heroes, so it'll be interesting to see what the main difference is between them and how they differ in their picks every season or every game, because you're gonna have to pick obviously someone to play certain heroes every game, and I'm curious to see who plays what each time around. I expect there to be a pretty big rotating door with these DPS players, but I'm not positive. It'll be interesting to see though how they play things. But it seemed like last season AKM and Seagull and Taimu and Effect, when he was around, they did a pretty good job at like bringing people in and out on that team, and it seemed like they had a pretty steady pattern of like bringing in other players in the middle of games to kind of fill the roles they need. Now, stage 4, of course, without Effect, a little bit different, and Arrow might do things a little bit differently for this season. But I'm curious to see how this roster's DPS roster works together. But I like it, and I think this team will be pretty well. Will do pretty well in its DPS role. All right, next up we have the Dallas Fuel off-tank role, which is where we saw the most recent signing. I say off-tank, it's really the flex role, but that's almost always the off-tank role. But in this case, it pretty much is a flex role, and that is Mickey and their new signing, RCK. First, we're going to talk about Mickey. Mickey is the team captain. I believe it was Seagull before he retired, but right now Mickey is their team captain. Mickey is a very, 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 very interesting player. Of course, he's the winner of the Havelka Award, the player with the biggest positive impact throughout the season. But Mickey proved in stage 4 that that Brigitte play was a big part of success. The Dallas Fuel found success late in the season because of Brigitte. His diva play at times was lackluster. It wasn't the most convincing at times. Seagull played a lot of diva throughout the season, especially in Stage 4, but Mickey was playing Brigitte at that time. And I'm telling you right now, Mickey may be the best Brigitte player in the Overwatch League. He's incredible at her, and that is one of the big reasons why this Dallas Fuel team found success late in the season. And if Brigitte is still a big part of the meta, which I believe she will be, I don't think the additions of Wrecking Ball and Ashe have changed enough of the meta that Brigitte won't be a big factor. I genuinely think that we are still in a Brigitte meta. I think we're in a weird meta right now, but I still think that triple tank, triple support meta, that GOATS comp, that huge just kind of slambulance, whatever you want to call it, meta is really big right now. And Brigitte is still a big part of that meta. And I think Mickey is still going to be one of the most dominant Brigitte players in this season. And for as long as Brigitte is relevant, I think that this team will manage to do pretty well. What's interesting, though, is of course the fact that the season is starting a little bit later, starting like a whole month later. But what this means is it's starting in starting in February. So by the time Stage 1 ends, give or take, we're going to have an announcement of a new hero. And it'll be on the PTR for about a month, and then, so probably by Stage 3 or Stage 4, probably by Stage 3 though, we'll have another hero. So it'll be earlier than it was last season, which is interesting. Very interesting. And obviously we have the All-Star break in the middle of the season, but look out for that. Because the meta might change a lot mid-season, and it'll be an interesting shift to look out for. But that's that. That's not what I'm here to talk about. So Mickey, of course, is going to be that flex role. He's going to be that leader in that flex role most likely, but they also had their new signing, RCK, who is also a well-known, or I don't say well-known, he's a pretty good diva player. He played for Team Giganti from Contenders 2018 Season 2 Europe. They placed in the 3rd, 4th range, losing to Eagle Gaming. And if you take a look, of course, at the Contenders 2018 overall roster, Eagle Gaming won the whole thing. So they pretty much got 3rd. So, they lost the eventual champions in the playoffs. That happens. It happens. But they were a top 8 team coming out of Contenders. They were in a Trials top 4 team. Team Giganti actually won their group. They were in the same group as Eagle Gaming, and they won every game in their group. Eagle Gaming was 3-2 in their group, but obviously Eagle Gaming came out and played well. So he's from a team that found success, and they've had success in the past, Team Giganti. But RCK is going to be a diva player for the most part. He'll play some other players too. He's a flex player. I mean, Dallas Seal shared a video. You saw him playing a bunch of different other DPS heroes and whatnot. But I like the signing. I think it's a good signing. And it gives them more room with Mickey, because if Mickey needs to play Brigitte, you have someone else to play diva, and if Mickey's not playing diva well, you have someone that you can sub in if you're not playing Brigitte, but you need a diva player that is performing well. I think it's a great signing. I think it's genuinely a thing that they needed after losing Seagull. I think that while the DPS part of Seagull is going to be missed, also his diva play was also going to be missed. But I think with this signing, it's going to help this team out a ton at staying well, or at staying on top of things and trying to keep that Stage 4 playstyle. I expect Mickey to start at that diva role, and definitely start on the Brigitte role, but I think we could see RCK switch in and out, especially if they're running triple tank, triple support with Mickey running Brigitte. We could see RCK, and we could see their main tank, which is what we're going to talk about next, which is OGE. Now, OGE had some big shoes to fill last season. He came in to replace XQC after his multiple suspensions and then eventual release from the Dallas Fuel. OGE came in, and he was impressive. He played well. I actually think OGE was one of the unsung heroes of this team. I think he played far better than a lot of people expected him to. He was kind of an unknown, but he came in, he played well, he impressed me. I thought he was a good player. One of the things that I really liked about OGE is that he kind of knew what he was, and look, he had some troubles of his own prior to the season starting with being involved in account boosting, but at the end of the day, I think OGE was a great player. I think he knew what he was, he knew what he was doing, and he had very good skill, and he was a good player, and I thought that he helped this team out a lot late in the season. He definitely improved as the season went on. I really liked him. I thought he was a really interesting player to watch. I'm going to adjust this mic real quick. I'm sorry. Um, I thought he was a really interesting character player to watch. He knew what he was doing, and I think that says a lot about who he is as a player. He's your main tank, and then you need a solid main tank. Obviously, South Korean players are typically, top level. They're typically your best players. And OGE is no exception. He was very good. He doesn't come from a really well-known team like a Kongdu Panther or anything like that. I don't even know if he was playing. The last thing he had that was like a big tournament before the Overwatch League was Apex Season 4 on the Conbox. But obviously, Dallas Fuel found him and he played well. So I'm happy with the way he played last season, and I think that he'll be a very solid player. Finally, we'll talk about the support roles. This team has 3 supports at the moment. They have Harry Hook, they have Unco, and they have Closer. Now, Harry Hook was their starting Mercy at the end of the season. I don't actually expect him to be their starting Mercy at the beginning of the season for Season 2. I think that there is a better option for this team with Closer, so I don't expect Harry Hook to be that starting Mercy, but he's a fine player. He's not bad. He has some other kind of flexing abilities. He his signature heroes are not just some of these supports like Lucio, like Mercy, but he's also known for Soldier 76 and McCree for whatever reason. So he's an interesting character, but I don't think he'll be the starter, and I think we'll see him every once in a while, but not as much as something like or someone like Closer, who comes from the London Spitfire, is a successful player, obviously coming from the team that won the championship, and I think that this helps out a lot for Dallas Fuel. Obviously, they had Custa early in the season. They traded him away to get Unco, who we'll talk about here in a second, because they needed that Zenyatta, that off support player, because obviously it became pretty clear that those are very important players, thanks to players like Jonak, players like Badoshan, who proved that you need a solid Zenyatta to find success. So they traded away Custa to the LA Valiant to get Unco, and he played well, and he was helpful for them, but Harry Hook wasn't the same player as Custa. He wasn't bad, and I want people to know that he was not a bad player by any stretch of the imagination. It was Harry Hook a bad player, but Closer is an improvement. I think Closer just has better spacing, or better positioning, and all that kind of stuff. He's more observant. He follows the game a little bit better, and he is an improvement in that Mercy role, and I expect him to be your starter for most of the season, if not the whole season. But those are their 2 main support players. I think both are fine. They're not struggling there, and that's not an issue ever. Finally, we have Unco, who is going to be their off healer. Their Zenyatta, their Moira, potentially their Ana, whatnot. That is Unco, and he was pretty good. He's no Jonak, he's no Badoshan, right? He's no top level Zenyatta player like they are, right? Like, they are game changing Zenyatas, but he's still a good Zenyatta. I'd say he's comparable to Boombox. I think Boombox is good, and I'd say Unco is around that same level. And that's just my opinion, obviously, but He is an improvement from their old position, which would have been Chip Cyan. Um, and he's looked solid for most of this uh, first season, and also impressed me with his play in the Overwatch World Cup with Team France. But Unco is definitely, I think, a player to keep your eye on with this roster. Um, this is such an important roster spot, right? That off support. Sorry if you hear that construction outside. Just started now. We'll wrap this video up soon. But as we saw in season one, your Zenyatta player, that off support role is such a big part of team success that you need to look out for how Unco plays throughout the season. If he plays well, then this team will, I think, continue to find that success that they found in Stage 4 of last season, and I'm expecting this team to actually play a lot better. As we know, the Pacific was a weak division last year, right? It was the weaker conference, and I don't think any of the Pacific teams this season, with the exception of the Seoul Dynasty, are better than they were last season. I think the Gladiators are not as good. They lost their best player in Fissure, and I think they've replaced him, but I don't know if it's enough. The LA Valiant lost Soon, one of their best players. They kept Space and Custa and a lot of other really good players, but they did lose that star DPS player in Soon. Seoul, of course, added Fissure, and I think Seoul is going to be a better team. But the Dallas Fuel have the opportunity to go out there and to fight for a playoff spot, potentially win their conference or potentially win their division. Who knows? But they definitely could be a playoff team. Of course, the Atlantic is a tough division, and with the amount of teams that make it, it really depends on how well they do. But with the fact that the end of the season is basically a playoff to get into playoffs, if Dallas is playing well at the end of the season, I think they will be a team in the playoffs. I genuinely think that. I think this team is good enough to make the playoffs. I think this team has what it needs to be a playoff team. And I genuinely think that this is the Dallas Fuel roster that they wanted. I think people were surprised by the lack of success Dallas Fuel found last year, but this year I think they look better, and I think we will see a very competitive Dallas Fuel roster, and also a much more competitive Pacific, because obviously there's other Pacific teams that are improved or that have become more level in skill, and of course we'll see what it's like with a lot of these new Pacific teams, none of them having released their roster yet. So I'm curious to see what we get going forward with the Pacific, but I think the Dallas Fuel are a better team this year than they were last year, and I think they will be a scary team for people to face off against. But those are just my thoughts. If you have your own thoughts, let me know in the comments down below what you think about the Dallas Fuel roster for Season 2 of the Overwatch League. As I've talked about, any changes to any of these rosters, I'll talk about them in kind of this appendix video at the end of all of this content, whatnot, before I get into like season predictions and whatnot. That is that, though. So if you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing. Helps out a lot. But until next time, I'm signing off. Bye bye.